This is Heavy Networking. I'm Greg Farrow, and with me is Ethan Banks to host today's show. Today, we're talking with Prasant Shenoy. He is the Vice President of Marketing for the VCF division at Broadcom. The topic is the transition to VMware Cloud Foundation in a sponsored show. We're looking for a difficult conversation about the changes that VMware has been making in recent times. Everybody knows that VMware's recent transition, the change of ownership, and now the changes that Broadcom has made has led to big changes that have been rolled out really quickly, like big changes in a hurry. And VMware has changed the way it sells products, the way it changes services, it's changed the way it engages with resellers. They've moved to subscription-only licensing. The bundles of products are all just so much going on. And in one way, I think part of what we're seeing in this change is so much transition is happening, but there is something in there for everyone. So what we want to do is have a conversation with Prashant to try and say, hey, we're seeing problems, but where's the light at the end of this tunnel? But I'm going to try and, dig into this. So Prashant, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for talking with us. It's been about 6 months since VMware announced the changes to its sales and its go-to-market strategy, substantial changes to all the things that I talked about. Let me ask a really wafty question, but I'm going to nail you on it. What's the value for the customer in these changes?
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks for having me here. It's going to be an exciting, fun conversation. So, looking forward to this.
Mm.
Yes, it's been a whirlwind change over the last 5 months. It definitely, for me personally, feels like 5 years, I must say. So, because of the amount of change, as you're rightly pointing out, Greg, as well as the pace in which we have done these changes with our customers. So,
Yeah,
to answer your question, Greg, in terms of what's the value to the customer, I'll give you one word: simplification in the way they do business with us and we do business with our customers, and then the pace of
mm,
innovation, and true focus on the value that we provide with our products to our customers, with
right.
increased R&D innovation that we're going to talk about, right? So that's in a very simple manner what it means to our customers. But to go back to your question, Greg, the
Mm,
big changes that we talk about are frankly in three big categories, and let's have a conversation because each one of these are humongous that would have taken
yeah,
any company of this size, uh, as VMware, an independent company. It would have taken us 3 to 4 years to get these changes done, and we did this in 3 months, right? So the first big area of change that we did was around what I call business transformation, right? So the second big area was portfolio transformation, and the third big area was ecosystem and route to market transformation. So
mm,
let's go into the business model transformation.
right.
Uh, for years, since we were part of an independent company from Dell, like when we were VMware and Raghu became the CEO, we set out on a path of becoming a multi-cloud leader with the focus
Yeah.
on moving our business model to be a true enterprise software subscription company, right? We were frankly one of the last, and we are, I think, one of the last enterprise software vendors out there that were moved from a perpetual business model to a licensed subscription business model, right? So,
Right.
and what we did when we became part of Broadcom was just put that into effect, plain and simple, right? So we
Yeah.
moved from a perpetual license to a per core subscription license.
Now let me point out something here. This is the perfect time from a business sense to say no more perpetual licenses, it's
Yeah,
subscription. I mean, it's clear to me that VMware going forward is just going to be subscription licensing. Hock Tan has said subscription licensing is here to stay. And he said it to shareholders, he said it to the press, he said it to the analysts.
yeah.
Um, so what VMware was doing before the transition was starting to say, look, we need to move to subscriptions. You're going to move to subscriptions. So one of the questions I'm going to ask you now that I've interrupted you after this is, what's the value in subscriptions? So go back to what you were saying about, moving from perpetual to subscriptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that this is the theme that you've set up, Greg, that you're going to constantly
Mm.
interrupt me as we are going to have a conversation. No, I'm kidding. But it's going to be a fun. This is exactly what it's
That's
right. Otherwise, I'm going to be on my
yeah,
soapbox uh,
yeah,
uh,
exactly. Yeah,
talking away. So, in one word, what subscription brings is a faster pace of innovation to our
right.
customers. That's why subscription is there, right? So, when we drop software releases pretty consistently, the security patches, the updates that is required to bring new features and functionality that our customers want and need, we bring it at a lot more faster pace. That's number one. Number two, it helps us have a very simple and renewed focus on few things. The challenge that we had with
Yeah.
subscription was we had subscription, we had like CPU based licensing, we had core based licensing, then we had ELAs, then we had other commercial models of licensing, and then we split our offering in all these different permutation and combination of licenses. So as a company, when we have that many different business models, guess where our focus is going to be? Nowhere. It's going to be all over the place,
Mm.
right? Because we got to focus on every different permutation and combination. So the value for us to move to subscription is that very clear focus on a single product, which is subscription based, and all of our energy of our thousands of engineers working on that being on that one single subscription offer. So those two, I would say, are big benefits to our customers.
Right. So we got what I think I hear you saying there is if you're on subscription licensing, you get your updates whenever, as and whenever. You don't
Yep.
have to wait for the next budget cycle. You don't have to wait for the next release for the patches to come in with the next feature. VMware can just move to sort of a continuous rollout of features.
Yeah. And the
Right.
third big advantage that I forgot to mention, Greg, is a huge one
Mm.
for us, which is license portability, right? So, what
Hmm.
that means is the customer can purchase a subscription license from us today, and then tomorrow they can say, you know what? I don't want to manage this license by myself. I want to take it to a managed service provider of my choice, a hyperscaler of my choice, give them our license and ask them to manage it on my behalf and get value
Right.
added services on top of that, right?
Now, before that was two different licenses, right? So I would have had one license, for a VCF foundation, for a
That you
VCF,
deployed in your data
management tool.
center or a colo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to move off prem, you'd have to fund the purchase of a new license off, to do VMware on Google, for example, right?
Exactly, and that caused, and then the one aspect was the portability. The other one was the consistency or inconsistency of experience in the previous world, right? Because whatever
Yeah.
license gave you from VMware in your on-premise colocation, when you went to a hyperscaler or a MSP with their different license and their value-added service and what software stack from VMware they had, the experience and the feature set and functionality could have been completely different for our customers, right?
Right.
So now with the license portability, what it means that it's the same license, it's the same software stack, it's the same set of functionality and experience that the customer is going to get with a beautiful benefit of investment protection and flexibility of how they want to use the license and who they want it to be using the license for.
But this also then extends to vSAN and NSX as well. So
Oh
if
yeah,
I
yeah,
have licenses for vSAN, I can use my vSAN licenses on, Azure. I can use my NSX licenses in, whatever, right? Because they're features, but those licenses are all part now of the VCF bundle. So
correct.
there is a sense here where I now don't have to go and buy another license on top. It's just all part of this VCF bundle. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the second part of our conversation, which is the portfolio simplification, right? So
Right.
now you get to have the entire what we call the private cloud infrastructure stack of software defined
Yeah.
compute with vSphere, software defined storage with vSAN, software defined networking with NSX, and all complete management, orchestration, automation, and operations with what we used to call ARIA, all packaged into a single product, which is VMware Cloud Foundation, right? And when we talk about
Right.
license portability, you get the latest and greatest of each of these components packed into one software release with VCF, right? So again, our customers don't have to use this decoder ring to say, hey, does VCF have vSphere 8 update 2 and vSAN 8 update 1 and NSX
Mm.
4.1, all of that combination and a headache, right? So we create a single software release that has the latest and greatest of all of the components there into one software release. So again, a pretty big advantage because that's the whole focus for VCF as we start
Mm.
talking about the portfolio simplification.
There's two sides to the argument here that I can see.
Yeah,
One side is the good part about subscriptions is as long as my subscription is valid, I can upgrade to anything that I want. I want to upgrade the ESX. I want to upgrade the NSX. I want to upgrade. Maybe I'm using some of the enhanced security features in NSX as well. All I have to do
yeah,
is, go and perform the upgrade. I've got the license ready to go while my subscription is valid. I can do it as and when. I don't have to go to my CIO for budget, run up a project, do a gap analysis, go to the reseller. It's just all there,
yeah. Absolutely.
right?
That's a big benefit to our customers, right? So one is the
Yeah.
consistency. Two is like you get to plan it very clearly in advance because you know what you're going to get with the software release and with the drops that I talked about. You're going to get a predictable way of getting updates to these software releases also, right? And then you can have a phased approach because
Right.
we quite clearly know that our customers are not all in the same exact journey to move to a private cloud, right? Some of them have different pieces and components of these full stack. Some of them have none on just vSphere, for example. So how do we work with them to get a phased approach and show them value along the way is a huge, huge focus area for us, which
Mm.
is around the adoption and consumption of these, right?
Well,
Because as
so
you know, in the enterprise software space, if you don't truly get the value and you don't truly deploy all of the greatness and capabilities that we've packed in, it's going to be very, very
uh,
hard for our customers to say in 3 months' time and 3 years' time, when renewal happens, it's like, I just use 10%. It happens in our own personal life, right? Like we have subscriptions of
yeah, yeah.
so many different things. And if you haven't realized all the capabilities of that software subscription license, I'm not going to renew it. I'm like, it's not worth it for me.
That's the big question there, isn't it? If I've
Yeah.
not been a VCF customer previously, it sounds like VMware wants me to be a VCF customer if I want to be or not. Is that the skew you're putting me into?
Yeah, I would put it in a slightly different way, right? So the way we are focused is, first of all, yes, VMware Cloud Foundation, we need to step back. VMware as a company, when it got acquired by Broadcom, we had several different business entities. We had, I think, 10,000 plus different SKUs that we put
Mm.
out in the market. Okay. And I think
Yeah.
at least 3 to 4 dozen different products. So when we became part of Broadcom, day one, what we did was consolidate that into 4 business divisions with 4 clear products, right? So the foundational business division was the VMware Cloud Foundation business division that I'm part of, right? And that is our customers' private cloud infrastructure platform that I'm going to talk about a bit more, right? So that was one business division that came by merging 4 different business entities in the previous VMware world, right? So there was a lot of consolidation, but the focus was to say, hey, you're not going to go build 4 different products. You're going to build one product for our customers, which is what they want, which is private cloud infrastructure,
Mm.
right? So that's number one. Number two, customers want true value added services on top of a private cloud infrastructure platform, right? Hey, I want
Yeah.
my app developers to create and run and scale and optimize my applications using modern CI CD methodology, modern tooling, and modern platforms. That's where Tanzu comes in, right? So Tanzu is our true
Mm.
application developer platform.
Going to stop you there on
Yeah,
Tanzu because this I think is something that a lot of people who are using, even if they're in VCF today, how many of them are actually using containers? Like containers are still a slow ramp. It
yeah,
hasn't been this, transformational, earth-shaking, everybody's in containers, VMs are dead. Remember when Kubernetes
oh
first came
yeah,
along and containers and Docker and it was VMs where VMs are dead, and no, they haven't. It's just containers. But VCF includes Tanzu, includes containers, right? Your whole
yeah, absolutely.
container
So
stack, the orchestration, and then once you want a container, you need storage. So vSAN's there doing that. Once you do that, you want security. So the NSX is there for that. Do you want to run the containers in VMs? Well, there are reasons why you might, right? So if you run
yeah,
Tanzu in an ESX hypervisor with an NSX security thing, but the license that you've now bought covers all of that, right? So a customer is now not forced into it, or you could look at it that way and say, VMware's driving me into using containers and they're forcing me into vSAN. The flip side is it's all there. It's
yeah.
free. You don't have to pay for it, right? You don't have to go and get a budget to buy an EMC storage array just to run Kubernetes containers.
You're spot on. Key part here is the consistency of platform, whether you want to run your what we call traditional VM based application or your containerized application on the same platform, which is built on top of vSphere and VCF, right? And
Mm,
VCF comes with built in what we used to call the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid or TKG, which is the
hmm
runtime Kubernetes engine already built into our platform, right? Now, Tanzu provides additional on top of that, right? Where the Tanzu business division, that is a separate business entity from VMware Cloud Foundation division, their focus is heavily on developers, right? So they provide a Tanzu application platform and application service,
mm,
which is used by the developers to build and create their Spring Java applications itself, right? VCF helps to run those applications, whether they are containerized applications or VM applications, whether it uses Tanzu or whether it uses OpenShift or any third party, right? So we are pretty
okay.
agnostic in that way. So we truly want this to be a private cloud platform that is more meant for your traditional business critical enterprise applications, as well as your modern applications and containerized applications.
There's a team of people working out ways to be nice to DevOps.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that is not the same as a team of people working out ways to be nice to the infrastructure team because
correct.
they're different, right?
Yeah, they have different use
One
case and requirements. So for us, the
the
focus
DevOps
is
wants to
truly,
be
yeah,
software driven, API led, integrated with code, frameworks, Terraform,
Ansible,
Salt
yeah,
Stack, Ansible,
Salt Stack.
whatever. Whereas the infrastructure team's got a different set of challenges, and they're also managing the different infrastructure. So if you're out there managing NSX and VLANs and storage arrays, and or whatever, and you're managing hypervisors and CPUs and memory stacks, you've just got a whole different experience. So what you're saying there is you're still recognizing that, and there's two different pieces of the team there in VCF. There's a DevOps, a
Yes.
DevOps SRE, softy, wafty, whatever they do. Those people are all weird to me. But there's an
Mhm.
infrastructure group of people, and their levers and their needs are different. And so VCF embraces both of those still. But it's all
Absolutely.
now. One of the things here again is the license is not separate. Before that, licensing used to be different licenses, and you had to go and buy them. Is that right?
Yeah, we have consolidated all of those licenses. When I talked about the portfolio simplification, these licenses were all like around different SKUs, right? So we had
Mm,
vCloud Suite, we had vSphere Enterprise license, we had VCF, and each one of these had these three editions of license, right? Like the
mm,
standard, the premier, the enterprise, the essentials, etc. Right? So, and again, what we've done is we took the best of all worlds, the enterprise grade license, and we converge that into a single license, and we converge that into a single product, right? So which is, again, to going back to Ethan's question, the focus was for a when we had a lot of customer conversations when we became a part of Broadcom, like Hawk himself in person went and met with several of our strategic accounts, the CIOs, the CEOs, the head of infrastructure, etc., to truly ask, where does VMware provide you the most critical value, right? Like
mm,
as an acquirer of a company and an asset, when he wants to invest R&D, he wants to be very clear. He's investing R&D in places where there's actual value to the customer. And what we realized from a cloud infrastructure standpoint is people love VMware for vSphere, right?
mm,
It's the
Yeah.
foundational virtualization technology that is bar none, and it's still after 20 plus years the market leader, right? People
Yeah.
love that, and pretty much every single VMware customer is a vSphere customer. Okay, but a lot of our customers are looking at VMware as a strategic, not a product company, but as an IT leader and a business partner because they
mm,
want to transform their digital initiatives. They want to have a cloud conversation, and they truly feel VMware has all the pieces put in place to help them be that cloud transformation partner, right? But we didn't quite deliver on that transformation, which is you
yeah.
truly need a cloud infrastructure that has all of that agility, the consumption model of public cloud, right? What AWS or Azure or
Yeah.
Google Cloud provides. But they want that cost
Okay.
control, they want that performance, they want the resiliency, they want the security of the private cloud, right? And VMware,
You,
they feel can bring the
you're
best
telling
of
the
both
cloud
worlds.
repatriation story, Prashanth. You
Yeah,
really are.
yeah,
That's, I mean, it's only part of the story in that depending on where your customers are in their journey to cloudifying their applications and making everything automated and DevOps driven, they may or may not have had a huge shift to the public cloud. But now that those companies that have made that massive shift to the public cloud and are looking at coming back to private cloud, repatriating workloads, to save money by and large. That is the biggest driver for that. Get those costs under control. And there's data governance and those other concerns, but it
yeah.
sounds like the VCF story today is you're giving them a private cloud to come back to as well.
Yeah, that's one big aspect, Ethan, around customers who are moved to the public cloud quote unquote bandwagon over the last several years. And for those of them where the cost is skyrocketing and getting out of control, some of them are looking at what are some of the workloads that didn't quite fit the public cloud paradigm that I can
Hmm.
bring back to private cloud and get the same consistency of experience, but a lot more cost control. That is absolutely one of the use cases that we are seeing our customers. But
Hmm.
more importantly, we have a lot of customers who tried to build that cloud on prem themselves. They became the
Yes.
system integrators, if you will, right? They got this best of breed products from a storage vendor, your favorite networking vendor, we all
Mm,
know who we are talking about, right? Their favorite compute vendor, their favorite management, and they all try to stitch those elements together to create their own cloud. And as we all know, that's a very hard thing to do, right? Like when you
mm.
have a best of breed silo vertically integrated, and then you're trying to create and stitch all these create together,
Yeah,
You
build
know
a
what? It's
consumption
actually
surface.
it's not hard to do. It's hard to keep running,
that
Well,
right?
it's
Plenty
hard
right
of
to
there.
people have done it, right?
and yeah, hard to keep
And
running and
my
hard to
point
keep.
here, so
Yeah,
the
good.
point that I would make is if you can certainly go out there and Terraform, Ansible, Salt Stack, puppet your way to an orchestrated cloud, but sustaining that month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year becomes increasingly more difficult. So if I can outsource that to VMware and in VCF, then I can now start to build directly to the pieces of the I could still be doing Terraform to do the deployment, the rollout, to automate the deployment infrastructure. I want to
Yeah,
ask another question here. I want to deviate left. A lot of customers out there are using third-party storage vendors and using third-party networking vendors,
yeah,
including, for physical underlay and for
yeah.
physical, and they've got overlays over the top. They've got EMC, or they've got
NetApp, yeah, pure storage.
NetApp, they've got Cisco, you've got HPE, who are really putting together a strategy there. Juniper's doing some really amazing stuff in this space.
Yeah,
But I think what you're trying to say is you don't have to turn to these people and work with multiple parties. You could start to consider a single solution. So instead of self-assembling, your own cloud out of the pieces, you can start to just does VMware. I mean, there is definitely a business strategy here. Let's be open about this. VMware says we've got vSphere, we've laid the foundations, built a company that is a winning product company. But what you haven't been able to do until over the years is to turn that into a platform company.
yeah,
And that is very hard to do. So that is something that Microsoft is to companies. Microsoft Office is a
yeah,
platform.
yeah,
Everybody uses it. And I think what you are indirectly saying with VMware Cloud Foundation as a business strategy is we want to be a platform company that everybody runs on. And that is the play here with VCF, or that's part of this play here with the strategy, is that VCF represents a whole um, platform on which you can run the on-prem data and the off-prem. It's a different mix when it's off-prem, but on-prem primarily, that whole thing. Am I
abs-
understanding that?
no, no, absolutely. I think it's a complete platform strategy, which is what our customers wanted us to do. And we start off with this vision. VCF is nothing new, just to
Mm,
be very clear, right? Like we
right.
unveiled the VCF vision around 6 years back when VMware was
Yeah.
an independent company, right? So, uh, but the way it was delivered internally through our silos that I was talking about made it very hard for us to truly deliver a platform approach. We built some really compelling capabilities when it comes to software defined compute, software defined storage, software defined networking, software
Mm,
defined management, automation, operations, etc. But we didn't make it
mm,
all work together in a very seamless manner for the end user experience, whether it's the IT
yeah.
architect, IT operator, admin, or even a DevOps, right? So, and that is the focus for us, is to truly like
Okay.
clean up the seams around these four products and make it work like a platform, which is what our customers want us
Let
to
me
do.
ask. Let me ask you the anti question, which is, what if I don't want to get rid of my third party storage or my third party
Perfect.
networking?
Yeah. And that's one of the
Is
key part, Greg, like to be very clear, right? So for a greenfield customer who doesn't have any of the traditional hardware infrastructure, I think they can have a complete software defined uh, virtualized infrastructure on top of
mm,
commodity hardware, right? That's clean.
yeah.
But as we all know, and you're just pointing, a lot of
Mm,
our big customers have invested millions and millions of dollars over a lot of years to bring their best of breed, right? Whether it's the networking, whether it's the storage, and we want to make sure those investments don't go to waste. One of the big value proposition for us in VCF is to work succinctly and compellingly on top of that without disrupting their architecture, but to bring additional value. Like, for
right.
example, the storage architecture, right? Storage is based on the workload and what kind of workload require what kind of storage architecture, right? For some, a
Mm,
hyper-converged infrastructure where the compute and storage scales together, like for virtual desktops, right? VDI.
right.
Compute and storage scales together. So having a hyper-converged infrastructure where you have software-defined compute and storage, which is vSphere and vSAN coming together, and
Yeah.
having a consistent management model works beautifully, right? but there are some very storage intensive applications like modern databases, AI, Gen
Mm,
AI applications, for which compute is not that much, but there's huge storage requirements. They need to constantly leverage data. And that's where we looked at it. And right now, vSphere works beautifully with third party storage, and so does vSAN. What we have done
yeah,
is we have built in more capabilities like vSAN Max, which is our disaggregated storage strategy, where you can
yeah,
independently scale up your storage without having to scale up your compute, but still get that benefit of this disaggregated storage, but with the
right.
benefit of the consistent management model. And then you can work with third party external storage too, right? With vSphere. So you have that based on what the workload is, pick your storage architecture, whether you want an external array, where you want a hyper
So
converged
you're not
infrastructure storage, whether you want a disaggregated storage, all managed through.
you're not trying to extinguish the existing
Yeah,
stuff necessarily. You're trying to say, I think what you're trying to say, if I can summarize, is there are a lot of things that vSAN can do that your expensive third-party storage isn't necessary for. Why
yeah,
not put that on vSAN? And there's
correct.
then
Yeah,
you're going to have what I call the Microsoft TechNet effect. You know, once I've got all those licenses, well, hello, I've got vSAN licenses. Suddenly I can move that off my compute because it doesn't cost me any extra. It's just part of my subscription,
yeah.
provided you can convince the customer to buy the VCF subscription, of course, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And then it goes back
mm,
to the point that I was saying, like, and if the customer, A, we have to show value of these to our customers, right? For their existing
mm,
infrastructure and why they have to buy the whole VCF stack. And use case based, application focused way of showing value has really worked out well for the customers and for us, right? So it's a journey for our customers. Number two, I think we want to make sure that it's very important because, as I mentioned, 2 years, 3 years down the lane, when renewals happen, and if they
mm,
haven't used different parts of VCF, they're not going to truly understand the value, right? So it's in our best
yeah.
interest too to make our customers successful, and that's where we have invested a
So,
ton of resource and ton of money to make sure we have a very strong customer success people involved in the sales, in the R&D engineering team, and we build products that are easier to deploy and easier to consume and easier to scale.
we talked about the R&D that Hock Tan
Yeah,
alluded to. We've mentioned that it's going to continue development. He's been recently pushed out a blog post saying, "We remain steadfast in our decision to focus our resources on research and development." Would you say that R&D is going to be in that integration of the product, the bits where old VMware, let's say pre-Broadcom VMware, did not bring those products together into a unified experience? They did not do a good job at that, with respect, but they didn't,
yeah,
right? You
yeah.
know, the VMware cloud, the V cloud, all that was a hodgepodge of business units going head to head, competing with each other. You know, there was so much going wrong that it was just hard to get things to work the way you wanted. So, is that where we're going to see R&D, or is it in other places? Like, is it just in the integration, or are we seeing more innovation, new technologies, new ways of doing things?
Absolutely. So yeah, yes to all the above. But let me put it in big buckets, right? For me, integration
Yeah,
is innovation. Frankly, right? Like it's not an easy job to do this. For me, innovation something that we provide extreme invaluable value and benefit to our customers, and we do it in a very unique and different manner than the rest of the competitors and vendors out there, right? And integration and building a software defined data center and a private cloud infrastructure is a hard thing to do, right? The hyperscalers have been able to achieve that at scale with billions and billions of investment. None of our customers have that level of investment, right? Bar very, very few, right? So how can we
mm,
industrialize that public cloud and bring it to the private cloud environment is a big, big value for us. And for that, you need to do integration, number one. So that's where the investment is going.
mm,
Number two, there are
right.
big uh, trends, as we were discussing, around AI, around new modern databases and
Mm,
data services, around cybersecurity threats that our customers are facing on a daily basis, like ransomware and disaster recovery, etc.
mm,
Right? These are critical value-added services on top of VMware Cloud Foundation, which is where we are accelerating our R&D innovation to, which is the next place where the R&D innovation is going today. And then, as
yeah.
we all know, VMware is one part of our customers' complete IT infrastructure. And VMware, even as part of the independent company that we were, has heavily focused on building a very robust ecosystem of partners, right? whether it's the
Okay.
OEM vendors, the ISVs, the managed service providers, the hyperscalers, the disties, the resellers. So we have a very, very consistent standardized route to market, but enough flexibility and choice for our customers to take our VMware
All right.
Cloud Foundation and deploy the way.
Let me hit a pain point that I think a lot of people are seeing is you mentioned distributors, VARs,
Yeah,
cloud partners, resellers. A
yeah,
lot of those companies, a lot of those organizations are struggling
yeah,
because the disruption to the go to market, the new licensing, the new pricing, getting the education out there, I would take the view that something went wrong there. That now, whether it's VMware or the resellers or the disties or the VARs or the pricing wasn't quite right on day one or was it rushed to market? Is that I mean, it's kind of behind us. As you said, the last 5 months feels like 5 years. I absolutely would feel that. It's gonna be a tough thing. Um, is it getting better? Like if I'm a customer talking to a reseller and the reseller gives me a quote and the quote is just not right. It's 10 times what I was 20 times, 50 times what, stories of people, paying tens of thousands now paying millions for being asked
yeah.
to pay millions for the same licensing. I don't I mean now there are use cases and maybe we'll touch on some of these where that's going to happen because the transition from there to here is different, right? But still, notwithstanding, a- after 5 months, is that settling down?
Yeah, you brought in multiple points there, Greg, and I'm going to unpack one by one, right? So,
Okay.
number one, the 5 months of change feeling like 5 years is because of the pace of change that we did, right?
Mm,
And when you have so much change happening in such little time, it is absolutely going to cause some anxiety to our partners. That includes
mm,
disty wars resellers. That's a very fair and clear point. So,
mm.
and that was much needed for us because when two big companies come together, you have different partner programs, partner incentives, etc. So it's legitimate for any company to create simplicity in our partner program. So what we did was move from our VMware Partner Connect program to the Broadcom Advantage program, right?
Right.
That
Mhm.
took us a few weeks and we announced it ahead without clearly telling what is the new program and who's going to be invited. And that caused the first round of confusion that you're
Yeah.
talking about, right? Now, a few months in, pretty much every single reseller who had any active contract with VMware customers for the last 24 to 48 months have all been invited to the Broadcom Advantage program and they've signed up, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
we have eased that. Number two, on the disty side, yes, I think there is disruption in the distributor because the focus for us, for our distributors was, hey, disties no longer can only like take this and distribute our software, but they should also be providing value added support services like L1 and L2 on top of our VMware software, right? So that's
Yeah.
where they can distinguish themselves and get profitability too. So that's one of the big changes that we did, and we had to select disties who are capable and have practices to provide these services and then enable them, right? So that's
Right.
the transition that we are already doing. So those are kind of the disty and the reseller aspect, and right now we are in a lot more stable state than we were back in November and December when we announced some of the changes, right? So that's number one. Number two, you pointed out on the price stuff, right? And that's
Yeah.
very critical. And it's we should call out quote unquote the elephant in the room or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm.
hey, a lot of our customers are complaining about like you are increasing the price. Hey, this is so typical of you, Broadcom, right? So I have
Yeah.
to be very, very clear there, right? So when it comes to our subscription pricing on the VMware Cloud Foundation, we cut the price by 50%. It was $700 per core per year pricing. It is
Mhm.
$350 per core. And this is the AS, this the list price, right? Not the selling
Mhm.
price with all the discounts and everything. That's number one.
Right.
And
Mhm.
the same goes for VMware vSphere Foundation 2, where we have reduced the price compared to the equivalent a la carte offering. So for any customer who has vSphere plus any other component, it works out to their benefit, both from a total cost of ownership and like to like pricing, that they turn out better today than previous VMware world. Now, the question that you're pointing is a very legitimate one because a lot of our customers were on perpetual licenses and
Yeah.
they were paying more of a SNS support renewal cost,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because they had perpetual license and all they had to do is every year or every few years pay an additional renewal for the support part.
Mm.
Yeah, software updates and only cost for that to provide
Mm.
support and security patches, etc. Now we are, since we end of sale and support for perpetual licenses, the only other way to for them to buy is subscription, and they are now buying a subscription license with built-in support. So they're comparing a renewal for support on a perpetual to a complete license with
Mm.
software built in. So that's where they're going to see the difference, right? Because this
Right.
is a brand new license with the licensing cost, with the support included as part of the licensing cost, versus them having to pay only the support renewal, and you're paying it for a 3 year, right? So this like to like it's not an apples to apples comparison, it's apples to a very different kind of fruit comparison. So part of it is kind of having the conversation on why they're seeing this price difference, and the next part is to truly show the incremental and additional value that they are getting because of all the things that we have packed in, whether it's VMware Cloud Foundation or whether it's the vSphere Foundation for the small data centers and mid-tier customers who don't want the full private cloud, right? They just want a virtualized compute environment with some
Mm.
operations. So we do have, to be very clear, a vSphere Foundation, which is for our long tail of our customers who don't truly want to be a cloud uh, provider or a private cloud.
Well, not everything. I think we all need to realize that not everything needs to be cloud,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
There are
Oh,
still edge use cases that don't need a cloud, right? A
yeah.
local hard drive with a hypervisor is all that we need. Ethan, you were going to say something.
Well, Prashant, you confirmed something that I was wondering about. Does everybody have to buy VCF? And the answer is no. If
No.
I'm a vSphere focused customer, that's mostly what I use. There is vSphere Foundation as a product that I can buy.
Yeah.
Now, again, not comparing apples to apples there. If I'm looking at what I was paying with my perpetually licensed vSphere versus what I'm going to be buying now, which is a subscription, because that's the new model. That's all that I can buy. That comes with support, and it's going
Yeah.
to be a 3-year contract. So I've
Yeah.
got to rethink how those costs are. So yes, there's still going to be more money in this year out of my pocket than I was budgeted for, maybe. But that's because of this change. Now, once I'm adjusted to this and I'm amortizing those costs, it's not going to be as bad as it seems at day
Mm.
one.
Yeah, the
Is it
amortization is the key part. And just to be clear, we have 1 year, 2 year, 3 year licenses. It's not just 3 year. And
Okay.
you'll see us very soon have annual payment plan also. So they don't need to pay for a 3 year license upfront. If they have a three
Mhm.
year subscription, they can pay on an annual basis, right? So it matches their budget model and the OpEx model. And again, like to like comparison of the functionality and feature with the licensing and support cost
Yeah.
is going to be very, very price competitive. And we strongly encourage our customers to also see what other options they have in the market, pound to pound, in terms of functionality. And that can be native public cloud services, other emerging vendors out there, and truly say, hey, what are you getting for the price that you're paying? And give us a
Okay.
shot.
So you would say to a customer that's getting sticker shock, they're looking at the quote from the reseller. Let's assume that the reseller is giving them the right pricing, right? Because it is a fact that not all resellers have caught up, right? And that's just something,
Yeah,
the market is large. Not all resellers have high level of competency. No disrespect to the resellers. It's just hard for them because they're often doing Microsoft licensing, Cisco, like they are spreadsheet warriors to the ultimate, the spreadsheet engineering that
yeah,
goes on in inside sales is horrendous, right? When you're a reseller, you've got to be able to understand all those different licensing models. I do feel for them.
yeah,
But the only thing that I'm seeing is people getting out on social media going like, oh, my license went from this number to
yeah.
10, 20, 50 times a number. And I'm always looking at it saying, is that the reseller making a mistake? Is that the distributor making a mistake? Or is
No,
it just,
yeah.
and I mean, it can always just be that the use case that they're using it for just doesn't fit VMware anymore, right?
Yeah,
So
that may be
many,
a tiny part, but it's frankly what I mentioned. Most of the use case are them comparing a renewal support cost to a complete license plus support subscription cost, right? That's where
right.
majority is. And to be very fair, customers who only had vSphere and now they want vSphere Foundation. vSphere Foundation has vSphere, vCenter, TKG that we talked about, as well
Yeah.
as VROps, logs, etc. Right? So you packed a lot, so it's not again a like to like comparison, and that price is higher than just a vSphere only, right? But we
Okay.
also have
Yeah.
other things that I haven't mentioned. There's
Yeah.
vSphere Standard and vSphere Essential Plus also that is out there in the market, which is just vSphere plus vCenter available for customers who don't want all the operations and logs, etc. So we have
Hmm.
provided that as an option too. And resellers are able and disties are able to sell any of these to our customers based on where they are,
No.
right? So there's plenty of options still, but we don't want to have 8,964 SKUs out there.
There is one thing I want to say here. If you are a customer, you have a responsibility to know this and
Yeah,
to take responsibility. You should not be outsourcing your buying decision to a reseller, right? You need to understand enough of this to go to the reseller and say, hang on, this quote's not right. Right. So you need to take some responsibility as well. If you're a customer here listening to this and going like, oh, it's not my fault. It's not up to me to get the pricing. Yes, it is. Right. If you go and buy a car from an American dealership, they'll say the cost of the car is 45,000. And then they say, and the dealer fee is 15,000. Well, that's up to
mhm,
you to understand what that means. Right. So
yeah,
if you go to your reseller and the reseller says, oh, VMware is charging 45,000, but we're charging 60,000 because we're charging a dealer fee, it's up to you to be smart about this. You don't IT is the same business. You need to understand what you're buying and where the ripples in the market come in, right? And you have to be a wary buyer. And some of the whining I've seen, like it is valid. Like you're saying, there are customers out there who are genuinely being snookered. They're caught in a pocket, and they've got a situation where things have just changed. As you say,
yeah,
vSphere, a reseller accidentally quotes some vSphere Enterprise instead of vSphere Essentials, right? And then all of a sudden, but they're not saying, suddenly I've got vSAN and, VC, all the things that you were talking about there,
yeah,
VROPS and all that sort of stuff, which makes owning it
Yeah.
better.
yeah.
Having
So
worked
I
for a
think there,
reseller, can I just add that resellers are not incentivized to sell you the cheapest thing? That's not how any of this works. And I think
yeah,
Yeah,
most of you out there understand that. And so
yeah,
yeah,
exactly what Greg was saying, you got to be smart about your quotes. You got to know what the SKUs represent. What is it you're actually getting? Are you going to use everything that's in that bundle? If you're very cost conscious, if your budget is very tight, exactly what Greg said, you've got to understand exactly what you're buying and what you need and what you're going to use. If you got sticker
mhm,
shock, you've got to understand that the reseller's not there to do you any favors. They may be your best friends and may be great to go out to those quarterly lunches, but at the end of the day, they want you to spend as much as you can. That's because that's
yeah.
how it works. That's how business
yeah.
is done.
And to be fair, right? Like we all have, at least speaking from Broadcom perspective, we all have a obligation and responsibility to create enough awareness in terms of what exactly is it that we are selling, right? Like there's, and that's why the pace of change, I keep coming back to that, because we've done tremendous number of changes, right? So and we
Yeah.
have to take the time to create education awareness for our disties to help them understand, hey, what is it that we are providing and why we are providing, so they can have that conversation with the customer.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think even they don't understand the value, so it's on us, I would say, to do that. And then, as you mentioned, yes, the customer should ask these tough questions both to Broadcom as well as to Disney to say why and how can I get this, and we will provide the right wherever possible and wherever we actually have solutions to there. And
Hmm.
frankly, the customers, as I mentioned, should VMware is, we take pride and accountability and
Hmm.
responsibility that we are known to drive the world's most trusted applications on our platform, right? And we don't take that trust lightly, right? So when customers make a big decision to say, hey, what is this value? We have to absolutely make sure that, hey, you can still run your mission critical applications, and here's the additional value that we are providing. And if you're planning on evaluating other platforms out there, think about the cost of refactoring, replatforming, rehosting, not to mention the skill set that we are talking about, right? Like there are so many VC experts out there that have used VMware products for the last 20 plus years. It's not an easy transition. So, and we completely
Hmm.
understand that, right? So our job is to provide the awareness of what this platform has, to make that platform simple to use, buy, deploy, scale, optimize, and renew. And number three, make sure our customers have all that other consideration taken into place to say, hey, here are your options, and do sit with us, sit with your disty, sit with your partner to do a value modeling analysis to say, what is your total cost of ownership? Just don't take the license cost.
You're saying is you've got to take the 3-year price. So
Yeah,
if you take the
and
cost
talk
of
about the benefits of those, right? Like, hey, if you're buying this, you can cut down your servers. If you're planning on buying 100 servers, now you can buy maybe 50 servers. You can get your server consolidation cost down, right? truly the essence of what VMware even was born as a company, right? It's
Mm.
all about extracting the best possible efficiency out of the infrastructure that you've got. Yeah.
There is a licensing wibble there, in that a lot of your licenses are 32 cores, 32 cores per CPU. There are some little ripples in there, and a lot of people have bought, CPUs with only 16 cores, but they
16
still have to
cores, yeah.
use
Yeah.
but they have to use a 32 core license on one CPU. There's things like that. Are those Sometimes I look at that and I think, if I was in a positive light for VMware, it'd be like, we expect you to grow up and grow into these, right? You should be buying CPUs with 32 cores or 64 cores or 96 cores. You should be getting into the modern servers. You shouldn't be downsizing your servers to just 16 or 8 cores and going that way. Is that what you're saying there?
No, one is the core of 5 years back, yeah, on a CPU versus the core of today is very different. There's
Mm,
a lot more capacity and capability built into the cores of today. So you can
mm,
extract a lot more value per core, I would say, right? And the
mm,
same goes at the CPU level also, right? So we have packed, if you compare Intel CPUs, the Xeon first and second generation to the fourth and fifth generation, they're vastly different. So the
yeah.
value of the software like vSphere and VMware Cloud Foundation on those CPUs and cores is a lot more than what it
Mm,
was even 3 years back or 4 years back. So that value needs to be thought through when customers
yeah.
purchase the software license. And number two, yes, I think that on a single CPU you can get a lot more VMs and workload capacity than you could have
Hmm.
gotten previously. So those two together provides a lot more benefit on a single core per core pricing that we are having
Right.
compared to what the per core pricing was or CPU pricing was even 5 years back.
You would say that customers should be running 32 or 64 cores per
Depends on
CPU.
what their
They sh
server capabilities are. We support 16 cores, we
Yeah,
support 20 cores, 32 cores, etc. Right? The licensing is not at
yeah,
8 core right now, right? It's the
yeah.
minimum. But we do provide capabilities to run cores. It's up to them. But in general, if they're on a 10-year-old server infrastructure, it's really important for them to get full value out of our software that they
So
upgrade
in
to
a
the
sense,
latest.
we've hit one of those situations where you're dragging the customer into the future, right? And that is reasonably, let me say something there. That is reasonably common at this point.
Yeah,
Most vendors on subscription licensing are saying, we are not going to support your licenses, our products for 10-year-old technology. You have the ability to update often and without having to wait. And this goes across the board, right? This is a standard software. Microsoft Office is not supporting 20-year-old Microsoft Office anymore. That window is
yeah,
closing. So on one hand, I want to be angry about it and say, you know, I shouldn't have to upgrade. I should be able to run it the way I want. I should be able to run my 10-year-old. But another part of me says, there's a lot of advantages in running modern hardware, because it's just, as you say, faster, denser, less power. Less power means less money. That should be part of your ROI, in some factor, because the power that these servers say, you're talking anything up to 100,000 a year just to power some of these servers.
yeah. And the savings that I was talking about, you get not only from server consolidation, but also the facility saving, right? The power cooling cost that you get is tremendous. And that all adds up, right? When you want to sit with your CFO to say, hey, I was paying renewal on the perpetual, now I'm paying 3x cost. Hey, here's what it means, right? This is where you can save cost on my server consolidation. This is where I can save
Yeah.
cost on the power and
See,
cooling. And this
but
is
that's
the
a
ROI that I'm going to get every year
but
based
that's
on
a
that.
big gap, right? If you're a big Fortune 500, if you're a top 2,500 global company, blah blah blah, you have that ROI at your fingertips. But
Yeah,
if you're a mid-sized company with, 5,000 people, your electricity for your data center might be paid for by someone else. And so you
yeah,
don't care quite so much, or whatever, right? And now
yeah.
another thing is, I want to come back to this 5 months of change. It does feel like you've ripped the band-aid off. There was a decision made to just say, this is going to be painful one way or the other. We're either going to have to change slowly and piece by piece, and that would require a massive go to sales. You would hire thousands of salespeople, and they would go out and educate the market and blah blah blah. But there is a counter argument which says, this is the one time that we can make this change. Let's just rip the band-aid off. It's going to be painful. We're going to force everybody to reevaluate. Am I right in that sort of view? Is that a valid sort of perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mentioned, right? Like this was our chance to, and this was based with extreme, as you know, the intent to acquire VMware by Broadcom happened
Mm,
over 2 years ago now, right? So
yeah.
we had plenty of time both for Broadcom as a company and for VMware as the company to truly evaluate what needs to be done if the acquisition goes through. And there's tons of customer conversation that we had as VMware and Broadcom CEO himself, Hawk Tan, had with our all of our strategic customers to say, hey, if you were me, where would you invest, right? And what is the pieces of VMware that are truly valuable for you, and where can be a strategic IT partner? So it is
Mm,
based on a lot of customer feedback. It's not based on inside out. It is based on a lot of customer feedback that, hey, this is what our customers value most. So let's put
mm,
all our energy and focus on this, and everything else is noise
right.
for us, right? So, and that requires a very painful, as you said, ripping the band-aids and all of that stuff that we had to
Yeah.
do. And it's not just about the technology, as we said, right? Like we
Yeah.
brought
Yeah.
in
Yep.
four different business divisions together. So we had to evaluate where are there overlaps, where can we consolidate, where can we truly streamline. Like these are heavy, heavy work that would have taken as an independent company for us years to do that. This
Mm.
became a
Yeah. That's right.
triggering point for us to do it, start off clean,
And gives you
focus,
permission to make
invest,
hard decisions. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Cut
and get it
products that
done.
aren't
So it's been
working, sell
exciting.
off the product.
Yeah.
Mm. Prashant, we're getting towards the end of our time. Unfortunately, the first thing I wanted to ask you about is futures. Hoktan made a commitment in his blog post, and you've been very clear in the blog post that you put out that there's a future here. You're not just shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic sort of thing. You're not saying we're making these changes, we're shuffling things around, and this is where we're at. That's it, we're done. So, give me some insight into what the future looks like. You're investing in the future. We talked about some of that and where we are. What does it look like? What are the things that you think
Yeah.
customers should be thinking about?
Absolutely. So I would say when it comes to VMware Cloud Foundation, which is where my focus is and our business division's focus is, we're going to focus on four key areas, I would say, right? And this
Mm,
is you're going to see us talking about this repeatedly. One is the vision for VMware Cloud Foundation and the reality, how our customers deploy today, is to be the best private cloud infrastructure there is out there that they
mm,
can manage it themselves in their data center or colo, or they can manage it as a managed service through our hyperscalers and hundreds of CSP partners out there. That's number
mm.
one, right? To do that, we have to focus our R&D investment in these four key areas. One is to create a private cloud infrastructure, we have to create a modern infrastructure. And we define a modern infrastructure as something that has a cloud operating model. The way you manage the
Mhm.
infrastructure is using cloud operating model principles. It needs to be completely software defined, right? Compute, network, storage, automation, and operations. Number two. Three, it needs to have a high degree of automation built in, right? Like you need to have that DevOps tool and mentality, that consumption
Yeah.
mentality built into the infrastructure, right? You were talking about infrastructure as code. You're talking about like, hey, how do I use an API construct to go and provision my infrastructure rather than doing it manually? What we have done is we've built a lot of best practices into our validated design guides and validated solutions, and we have built blueprints on that our customers
Mm,
can take it and make it deployed automatically, right? The two other points in terms of the modern infrastructure itself is the third one is it has to have a very unified, consistent experience, right? Like single
yeah.
sign-on. Right now,
Yeah.
it isn't. It requires 20 different ways of logging into different aspects. So
Okay.
single
Yeah.
sign-on experience, so you can based on your experience. Are you a developer? Are you a DevOps? Are you an IT operator? Are you an
Mm,
admin? And you'll have your workflow, and you can have a SSO based on your company to get into this workflow. So that, in a very simple manner, is modern infrastructure. The second part of our focus is truly creating that cloud experience for the developers. At the end of the day, infrastructure is a means to an end for developers to create their best possible awesome application for their end
yes.
users,
Hmm.
whether it's employees or their consumers. So
Right.
we have a consumption layer on top of VMware Cloud Foundation where developers can use their language and ask to provision a service. In fact, Broadcom IT is creating that today, right, based on
Right.
VCF, where we have 26 different business divisions, and the developers in their business divisions have requirements, right, for the infrastructure. So you go ask for a requirement. Hey, I want these many Kubernetes pod and this many modern database services, right? And without having to file a ticket, you have a self-service catalog where it gets provisioned for you. and you go off to the
Okay.
races to create the application. So building that for your modern applications, for your private AI applications, for your modern databases and your traditional applications is a big focus area for us.
But not expecting to see a whole bunch of new innovation. Like, I mean, it's important to talk about VMware is still one of the leading SASE companies out in the world, right? That SD-WAN, and I would like to see the SASE be tightly integrated with
Yeah.
VCF. So the idea is that I could administer my whole, not just the data center, but out to the branch and the WAN and have that integrated. But that is a big ask because nobody's doing that today.
Yeah,
But that
absolutely.
would be that the sort
Absolutely.
of thing we're talking about?
Yeah, one thing is to get our data center and hybrid cloud infrastructure to be very easily consumable by the developers. And then the other
Mm,
one is extending it to the edge, the
mm,
remote edge, whether it's robo, retail edge, factory automation edge, etc., which is where the SD-WAN and SASE aspect comes from a networking and security standpoint. But from a cloud infrastructure standpoint, VCF for the edge is still a very critical part of our strategy and focus area, right?
right. But
So
not so much. There's not so much new technology coming along. I mean, obviously, there's VMware for AI. AI is more of an accessory. You optimize a particular parts of VMware, of the services. So if you want to deploy an AI set of hypervisors that can spawn and run and use GPUs, that doesn't require a massive change in VCF. That's a substantial but project that sits on the side doing its thing, right?
it's a private AI is part of the VCF business division too, and private AI
Mm,
requires a lot of things that you can do to run like VMs for deep learning, right? And there are changes
yeah.
that we need to do. How to have virtual GPUs, just like we did with CPUs and DPUs, we are doing it for GPUs, right? So you can have
Hmm.
effective utilization of the GPUs. As we all know, GPUs are pretty hard to get now and really expensive compared to CPUs. So
Yeah.
our focus for
He's
us is
just
to
just take
get
note there,
effective.
people. He's actually quite jealous. He wishes he could charge that much.
Yeah, and it's a
Yeah,
huge focus for us
yeah,
when
yeah.
you want to run Gen AI application, but with all that confidentiality, the privacy, the data
That's
access
right. Yeah,
requirements that a lot of our customers have. VCF is that foundation, and the private AI offering that we have, whether it's with NVIDIA and other
yeah.
ecosystem partners, is a huge focus
I
area
think we're
for
gonna
us.
on-prem AI is going to become a big thing. It'll be
Yeah,
slow to emerge. It's not going to happen this year. It's
yeah.
something that'll gradually happen and roll out over time. But
And
um,
based on use cases, right? A lot of our customers are using for code development, for Copilot, for
yeah,
better customer experience in their contact center and support, right? And
mm,
even for other things like documentation and reading for Gen AI, et cetera. So there are quite a few use cases depending on the vertical that we are getting. So we are working heavily with our ISVs on the top for who provide different ML frameworks, LLM models, etc., as well as with our vendors like NVIDIA, with Intel, etc., as well as with our OEM providers and partners, and building this true
yeah,
integrated, well-defined architecture to go drive that. So that's a big focus area for us. And the last is around heavy on security and resiliency, right? So as I mentioned, cybersecurity is critical for us, and we have a very industry-leading capability around VMware disaster
hmm,
recovery and ransomware recovery. We are bringing all of that together into a solution called VMware Live Recovery that has site recovery, disaster, ransomware, all of it packaged
right.
using a cloud operating model. And we are building more innovations on top of that, right? So it can be truly a hybrid cloud disaster recovery solution that runs on top of VCF. And we built a lot more resiliency into our underlying infrastructure because VMware, as an independent company and now as part of Broadcom, is very well known for providing highly trustworthy, highly resilient, highly
Yeah,
available infrastructure where you can move your workloads and without having to put your infrastructure down, or even if your infrastructure down, there's workload portability, so you
I
still have high resiliency built into your application without you
yeah,
as a developer having to build that resilience in the application.
yeah. And I
So
think
those
I
are
think the thing is, I remember 10 years ago, I sort of said VMware's the only company that's going to have the full portfolio to build an on-prem cloud.
mhm,
And we've seen so many other companies attempt to do it. There are a few other companies who've been able to now build subscription services where they bundle the hardware and the on-prem cloud together, but they still haven't gotten real traction. And I do, if I take your point of view, what you're saying is VMware wants to be the on-prem cloud platform in the same way that when you go to AWS, you use their mainframe, their proprietary, what I think of as a mainframe, in
yeah,
inverted commas. You use their APIs, you use their products. They're proprietary to AWS. Their databases are proprietary. The apps might look a little standardized, and if you go over to Google, you want to use Google TPUs. If you want to use their storage, you have to use Speak. And VMware is going to become like their version of an on-prem cloud. So it's not just compute or compute and, it's the whole deal. And because part of
Mm.
VMware's portfolio is also the application deployment, right? You can click a button and deploy a
Yep.
MySQL,
Yep.
right?
Mm.
VM. A lot of people who do infrastructure don't realize that you've made acquisitions in that space to say, I want a WordPress instance
Yep.
run up. You just click a button and there's a VM with WordPress ready to go,
Mm.
right? And
Yep.
that is the cloud operating model that I don't
Yeah,
think a lot
and
of
then this
people.
self-service catalog that I was talking about, that's the cloud experience for the
That's
developers and the DevOps that I'm talking about, right? But yes, and to add to your point, it's yes, we want to be the best private cloud platform for our customers' data center or
Mhm.
co-location, but we want to give the customers the flexibility to take that same platform and extend it or deploy it in a public cloud provider or a CSP of their choice, which is very, very
Yeah,
critical for us, right? It's all about flexibility and choice that we as a company have been known for. Now it's about
yeah.
consistency, standardization, and simplicity
That's
that we're going to
that's
focus
super
on.
easy because a lot of times you just want to get started and you go into a CSP, you spawn up the VMs, you get the
Yeah,
development project started, and 2 or 3 months in, the project's going to be a success. It's got legs. So now you can say, okay, we're going to bring that on-prem and allocate permanent resource to that, put it into the IT help desk, create the run books and all that sort of stuff. So that is more in line with what whereas before you had to go ahead and allocate all the resources and so forth. But it's all consistently the same DevOps, the same calls, the
yeah,
same whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wanted to mention one last part around this, right? Around all these three pillars, it goes back to our focus on providing the best possible value at the least possible cost. So you'll
Right.
see us focus intensely on creating the lowest possible total cost of ownership for our customers. Every functionality that we are building in right now, the engineers and
Mm.
the product teams are saying, what is the value to the customer and how much does it save or how much does it speed up in terms of operations or
Uh,
automation. So this is at the end of the day what a true cloud experience is, right? It's that
I
agility
love the slide. I love the
experience.
slide you gave me where claiming 41% cost reduction on-prem versus public cloud.
Yep.
I would love to hear from anybody in the audience who's thinking, um, that is can you really get that? And get in contact with us and tell us if you think you're going to get that sort of cost reduction. Thanks very much, Prashant, for joining us today. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap it up. We're out of time. As always, you've been listening to the Packet Pushers. Thanks so much for listening to us. If you want more information about VMware, if you want to get in contact with Prashant, he's got some details in the notes, but you should certainly contact your reseller or your favorite VMware friend to get more information about the thing. Thanks very much for listening to us here at the Packet Pushers. As always, you can find us on the internet, LinkedIn. We're all out there. And thanks very much for listening. And as always, remember that too much technology would never be enough.